Hey everybody, I'm Adrian Bustamante and welcome back to Food Deconstructed. On this episode, we're deconstructing the apple pie. And this recipe is actually an apple pork Wellington. This is going to be a great twist on the apple pie, as well as a little bit of a twist on the normal beef Wellington. Now, apples and pork go very well together. I mean, people love to put applesauce on their pork chops, and that's exactly what we're trying to go for here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with our filling, or what's going to actually be on the inside of our pork loin. And it's going to be 4 Honeycrisp apples. We're going to be sauteing those in 2 tablespoons of butter, 1 teaspoon of brown sugar, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and half teaspoon of salt. So let's get this going here and throw our butter in the pan. As always, try and get that to melt a little bit before we throw the rest of our spices and our apples in there. Now we're going to saute these up and kind of have them caramelize a little bit as well. It's going to be a great added flavor and a nice little sweet hint to that savory meat. A little bit of salt in here, some cinnamon, some brown sugar to enhance the sweetness of the already nice and sweet apples. That butter in there again. And let's get these apples in there. Try and mix it up just a little bit before I let it caramelize to try and get some of that butter and cinnamon and salt and sugar all over each piece. So I'm gonna let these do is saute and get nice and tender for me. And then I'm going to move on to making our rub for our tenderloin. We're still going to let these finish sauteing and caramelizing, but I'm going to move on to my rub. Now, a rub is a great way to add some flavor to your meat without having to marinate it. Now, you can make your rub out of just about whatever seasoning you like, but we're going to do ours out of some cinnamon, some chipotle powder, salt, ginger, some cloves, and then also some pepper as well. So we're actually going to start off with 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of chipotle powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of ginger, half a teaspoon of freshly cracked cloves, a teaspoon of pepper, 1 tablespoon of olive oil. I'm just going to kind of eyeball that, whisk it all together here. Shouldn't take long. All these spices are going to come together quite nicely. Then we get our tenderloin out. We're going to rub it nice and liberally all over it. So there is our rub, which we're going to set aside. And then check up on our apples here. I'm going to bring out our pork tenderloin. Now, before we sear this, what we're going to do is actually put the rub on the tenderloin. I'm actually just going to place this in the bowl and come around on it, and then I will literally rub the tenderloin when the rub is on it. Just make sure you get that rub nice and liberal all over that meat. And these are looking nice. We're going to transfer these apples over to a bowl and let them cool off. These apples are actually going to be placed inside of our tenderloin here once we're done searing it. Now what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to sear it in this same pan. Add a little oil to the pan. Now, searing your meat is a great way to enhance the flavor of it as well as keep that moisture in. Looks like our pork loin is nice and seared on both sides. I'm going to bring it back over to the plate. Now what I'm also going to do now is I'm going to butterfly it. Just cutting it right down the middle, but not all the way through. Now, since your meat isn't cooked all the way through, it's not going to be as easy to cut as in a normal cooked piece of meat. Just fillet open, just like so. Now we're going to bring in the apples that we're cooking in our butter and salt and all that fun stuff. Now we're just going to kind of spoon this into the filleted section of the pork loin. Much in there that'll fit. You don't want to overdo it because again, you still have to wrap this in a puff pastry. Now you can make your pastry whichever way you like at home. We bought this pre-bought in a store I did it just because it's going to fit my pork loin a little bit better. Now I'm going to flour my cutting board before, because I am going to just kind of run a quick roll over this, but I want to make sure that this puff pastry doesn't stick to my cutting board or to my rolling pin. Get it a little bit bigger for ourselves. All right, now we're going to bring in our prosciutto and cheddar cheese. Now I'm going to use some smoked cheddar just for a hint of extra flavor to add to that meat, but you can, again, use whatever cheese or flavor you want. So the first thing we're going to put on, though, is our prosciutto. Now prosciutto is a nice thin sliced cut of ham, and you're just going to line the area that you think you're going to lay your pork loin through. Now you're going to want to make sure that you get enough prosciutto in there that almost every bite of your pork loin is going to get prosciutto. Now what you're also going to want to do, though, is leave about an inch border on each side, because I am going to have to fold those two sides up to make sure that we have fully encased that pork loin in our puff pastry. And then I'm going to add my cheese of cheddar cheese back in with the pork loin. Slip this right down the middle where the cheese is at. Before I start rolling, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make a quick egg wash, because I am going to want to seal the top of it to make sure that nothing comes out during baking. So again, I'm going to take a quick egg, add a little bit of water to it, and whisk it up. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that your whole loin is completely encased. And it should work out perfectly to where almost every bite is going to get just a little bit of prosciutto. Our cheese is actually going to be on top, because we're actually going to lay this seam down. Don't be afraid to get in there. It's not really too delicate. I'm going to want to fold this over. Again, a little egg wash on the seams. Along with being a little bit of an adhesive, this is also going to kind of help us create that nice brown, flaky texture that we're going to want from our pastry. Want to be as careful as possible. We're going to bring in our baking sheet here. Take this, and like I said, we're going to go seam side down. Now I'm going to throw just a little bit of egg wash over the top, like I said, to kind of give it that little bit of brown, flaky texture. Okay. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to poke some holes in here just for ventilation purposes, so it has some air so you don't get any explosions in our oven. All right, I have my oven preheating at about 375. We're going to put this in there for about 30 to 40 minutes. Just keep an eye on it between that 30 and 40 minute period, depending on how hot your oven gets. You don't really want it to burn, but you want to see that nice golden brown happen on the puff pastry. So I'm going to put this in the oven, and when I come back, we're going to show you how to make the sauce. Okay, that's in the oven. Now it's time to make our sauce. Now we're going to make our sauce with a nice sour cream base. We're also going to add a tablespoon of horseradish, quarter cup of applesauce, and a tablespoon of cinnamon. I'm just going to whisk all these together. That's good. The pork loin Wellington is just ready to get out of the oven. I'm going to place it on my cutting board so I can cut it in half and see how this works. Now you can see that nice golden brown that came through on the pastry from that egg wash, but here we go. Let's slice this up a little bit. You can just smell that prosciutto and smoked cheddar. Ooh, looking good, smelling good. The last piece of our puzzle is our little sour cream, horseradish, applesauce, and cinnamon. What I'm going to do is just kind of bring this across the center here. And there you have it, folks. Our apple pork loin Wellington. All right, so I already have a nice little plate set aside for myself. See how this tastes, and make sure I get a little piece of everything. Puff pastry, prosciutto, cheese, and of course, the pork loin. Dip it in our sauce here. All right. Just as I thought. The apple and the pork go really, really well together. The puff pastry is just the epitome of a great replacement for that apple pie crust. The actual sauce almost changes the flavor a little bit as soon as it kind of gets intertwined with everything. You don't really get a lot of the horseradish. It's just a nice creamy texture along with everything else. But overall, a great dish. Definitely has all the essence of an apple pie in it. Stay tuned for our next recipe, the warm cider and rum cocktail.